Middlesbrough, cargo fleet,
South Bank, Grangestown, Warrenby,
Middlesbrough, cargo fleet,
South Bank, Grangetown, Warrenby, Redcar Central. I used to travel on this line twice a week, to my ballet class, on my own from 10 years old until I was 18. That was after my family moved from Redcar up the line to Eaglescliffe. So it's not surprising the names of the stations are engraved on my memory. Middlesbrough, cargo fleet, South Bank, Grangetown, Warrenby. All along the route, just yards from the train, flames and sparks flying skywards out of the darkness, lighting up the night. Men stripped to their waists, dragging bars of molten steel out of the fire. That was more than 30 years ago, when the name Teesside was synonymous with iron and steel. Now, the last blast furnace is closing. Mothballing, they call it.
We continue now with our main story of the day, a very historic day on Teesside. The news that 1,700 people, along with their families, facing a very uncertain future. News today from Teesside Cast Products that the plant will be partially mothballed by the end of January.
I've lived here all my life. I don't want to live anywhere else. Even when I go away on holiday, halfway through the holiday I'm wanting to come home. I like it here. I've never moved more than 5 miles away from where I was born. But I like to live in a vibrant, growing community, you know, a thriving community, and I figure that that's not going to be the case.
I'm part of the team at the minute that's mothballing the plant, and it's the saddest thing I've ever had to do my whole time working. You know, switch the lights off when you go out.
It's quite a daunting thing that after 170 years it's just going to disappear. Leaves a bit of a hole, a bit of emptiness.
The fear is that people will disappear out the area, and suddenly that proudness that people have of coming from Teesside, that may be lost. I'm a proud Teessider. A lot of people think it's just an industrial, smoky area, but we love the area, and it seems to be getting dissolved at the moment, and it's sad.
The move is expected to lead to the loss of all 1,600 posts at the site and bring to an end more than 150 years of steelmaking in the area.
It's hard to believe it's coming to an end. This is a region which has forged its own particular identity from its relationship with iron and steel. In its heyday, the industry employed 40,000 people. They'll tell you it's in their blood, a part of Teesside's DNA. And identity has been an issue in this area for as long as I can remember, squeezed as it is between its more assertive neighbours, Yorkshire to the south, Durham and Newcastle to the north.
Well, I think we should go up to halfway up the hill was the layer of the ironstone, the level of the ironstone, right? The seam was about anywhere between 12 to 20 foot thick, this seam of ironstone, and it outcropped halfway up the hill. So now there's like where the railway once was, where all the mines were, there's now like a woodland walk.
I'm looking for the beginning of the story of iron and steel in the hills above Eston with Craig Hornby, a local filmmaker frustrated at the lack of recognition for an industry that had laid the foundations for modern Teesside. It prompted him to dig away at his own past, and it takes us back to the start of the story with the discovery of iron under this hill.
And you see the whole expanse of Teesside beneath you, the great industrial skyline, you know. So this is Eston Nab, the top of the hill, 800 feet above sea level, looking down across Teesside from over in the east. You've got Redcar, there's the blast furnace in the distance there now, stone cold sadly. The ICI, former ICI plant in the foreground there, Wilton, still making lots of noise. I don't think many people work there anymore, like, it's all very state of the art. Right away across, following the river along to the transporter bridge, where you can just see through the haze. So this view back in the 1840s, this would have been really all just low-lying agricultural land, and all of a sudden, after the ironstone's discovered, it's all just pouring out of these hills and rolling down the banks to the railway and the steel, the ironworks.
20 years ago, while on the dole, Craig set out with a video recorder to capture the memories of the last remaining iron miners before they disappeared forever. Then in their 80s and 90s, he discovered they'd worked in the Eston mines, less than a mile from where he'd grown up.
I grew up just down here on the Whale Hill estate, just down from the supermarket there. I can still see our street. And as a kid you'd run up here for the adventure, you know, and really let your imaginations run wild through the woods, I guess. And to see these old tunnels on the hills was mysterious. You know, we knew nothing about it. We weren't taught it at school. It wasn't part of who we were because we'd come from South Bank, Grangetown and Middlesbrough, moving up as the estate spread out away from the works, you see. So it certainly wasn't part of our sort of cultural heritage, shall we say. And you come up the hills and it was just an amazing sort of adventure through the woods and seeing these old ruined buildings, and you know, you started wondering about, you know, what it must have been like working underneath the hills. It was quite fascinating for me as a little kid, really.
The first day I went up there into the pit, Dad took us the first day, and I'm not kidding you, when I started to walk in there, and my little glimmer with my midge, I'd lit my midge, and all I could see in front of me was a little yellow light on the floor, and I couldn't see nothing round me. It was all black. I know there's people with me, I could hear them talking, but I couldn't see them. Oh, and the sweat. The sweat started to come on me. I was really frightened. I was really and truly frightened.
The Teesside story hadn't been told, and we know we're pretty much in the shadow of sort of the great Geordie nation up the road, you see, and it was time to tell our own story. And I just met these old guys who worked in the pit, the iron pit, which wasn't documented. People know about the Geordie coal miner. They didn't know about the Eston and Cleveland ironstone miner. And it was time to tell that story before they died out, because people in Eston didn't know about it. And Eston was the greatest ironstone mining town in the world at the time, you know. And I grew up here, and it was time to tell that story. And these men lived for this. They'd talk to me for hours about it, you know. They worked beneath this hill.
If you hadn't been so knackered with your work on a summer's morning coming over the moor of nights, you know, you could appreciate what it was, because it quite, you know, it was quite lovely. The sun shining and all the moor was cool with heather. But it was a different bloody tale in winter.
You didn't know whether it was snowing, raining, the bloody sun was shining, the bugger out, you got out the cage.
Men like Tom Kerrison, Jack Collins, George Appleby, Jack Plews, Harold Brightman, Lowell Barker were the last in a long line of iron miners who'd worked the Eston Hills since the great iron rush of the 1850s. The renowned ironmasters Henry Bolko and John Vaughan had set up the first rolling mill and foundry in nearby Middlesbrough a decade earlier, but it was the discovery of iron ore here in these hills that was to fire up the industry, resulting in 100 blast furnaces lining the River Tees, transforming the landscape from Stockton to Redcar as they blazed around the clock, producing the best steel in the world. Middlesbrough quickly gained recognition as the fastest growing town in Victorian Britain, expanding virtually overnight from a small rural settlement to a town of 19,000.
So from Redcar right to Stockton, let's say about 14 mile, you had this immense surge of development in the 1850s and 60s, and within about 15 years this really sparse, obscure corner of northeast Yorkshire had become the iron producing capital of the world.
This remarkable feat was marked by a visit from Gladstone in 1862, confounding Southerners' opinion of the northeast, as he christened the new industry an Infant Hercules.
The world had never seen a conurbation of industry like this ever in its history, you know. And Gladstone was taken to the foot of these hills and shown the expanse of it all.
And he made the famous quote that Middlesbrough is an infant, it is true, but an infant Hercules. And he called us the youngest child of England's enterprise. And I mean, in the great burgeoning Victorian industrial empire, to be called that was something quite important.
Ian Stubbs of Cleveland Museums. The boom coincided with the expansion of the railways, developed just a few miles down the road between Stockton and Darlington. And as the industry flourished, more furnaces sprang up moving further down the river towards the mouth of the Tees, and thousands of miles of rail track forged from Teesside iron and steel were shipped across the world, with some unexpected consequences.